Hello there. We are now being forewarned to expect a surge in the number of heart attacks. Oh, and there's some nutty advice to help save the planet too. The mainstream press has reports of 2 major new studies and a warning that as a result we should expect a wave of heart attacks. And the cause, we're being told, is our diet. But I do have to wonder if there's anything else that occurred in the last couple of years that could have the same result. Aren't we already seeing a rise in so-called unexplained deaths and excess deaths? 2 new studies have found conclusive links between the consumption of ultra-processed foods with increased cardiac disease risk, including heart attacks and strokes, says The Independent. With The Guardian saying, ultra-processed food significantly raises the risk of high blood pressure, heart disease, heart attacks and strokes, according to 2 studies that one expert says should serve as a wake-up call for governments worldwide. Not something I was unaware of. People have been warning about this for many years. But it's being splurged across the press now. And we're also told it can lead to an increase in diabetes. And the message is that we're now supposed to switch to eating only fresh fruit, veg and unprocessed meats. Because a lot of the stuff people buy from the shops has been ultra-processed and is therefore harmful to our health, including some meats, breads, pizzas, breakfast cereals and cheeses. Even those healthy protein bars people buy can fall into the UPF category. In fact, it is thought that the diet of the average Brit contains 55% harmful ultra-processed foods. The first study from the 4th Military Medical University in China tracked 325,000 men and found that those with the highest level of UPF consumption were 24% more likely to experience cardiovascular problems. The second study from the University of Sydney tracked 10,000 women for 15 years and found that those who consumed the most UPFs were 39% more likely to develop high blood pressure than those with the lowest UPF intake, even after taking sugar, salt and fat intake into account. And up come the calls to tax all processed foods out of existence, like they do with tobacco, alcohol, petrol and diesel, for example. But those foods are not the most processed. There are other things on the supermarket shelves that are being touted as foods that are beyond ultra-processed. Yes, those fake meats that the likes of the UN, the WEF and the corporates are trying to move us onto. And the upcoming move by these people to get us to accept eating insects instead of livestock. What can be more processed than gunk made in a factory from a chemical ooze and shaped and coloured to look like steak, for example? And that goes for fake milk as well. I wonder if China has some new type of Frankenstein foods to sell to the West on the back of their 4th Military Medical University study. So as far as I'm concerned, all these non-natural foods should be banned from the shops. Because if it only takes some processing of natural foods to create havoc in our bodies, then what will we be finding out in the decades to come from eating these Frankenstein foods? And our bodies having also taken a bit of a battering over the last couple of years, well, for those that took it anyway, it might be a compounding issue. Now, my fear is that instead of reverting to a more 1950s diet, coupled with exercise, we will instead be driven by government to follow the WEF guidance and start to move towards a diet of factory-made frankenfoods and bugs, on the basis that they are made in clean laboratories with lots of health-giving ingredients and so must be so healthy and wonderful for us. And they'll have made it taste better than the real thing, or so they'll claim. And don't worry your little heads about what's in that gunk, just believe the scientists. And they won't tell you anyway because it's a corporate patented secret. Don't worry, we've got your best interests at heart, they'll say, as well as comforting us with the words that a government agency has tested the stuff and found that it's more healthy and nutritious than nasty, dirty agricultural food. And because it's so healthy and pure, it'll have to be a bit more expensive, of course. But one thing that puzzles me is that the Times is running the story containing a graph from 2012 to 2022 that shows a very gradual increase in a number of hospital visits for some heart problems over that decade. But visits for coronary heart disease, for example, fell slowly over the decade. Surely some rise in hospital visits is to be expected when our population has both increased in size and aged over that time frame. Anyway, whatever, we're to expect a wave of heart problems in the near future, it seems. So we're now being told that to save the planet we shouldn't heat our homes in the evening. Yes, when you get back from work to a cold house, you should not switch the heating on. This comes from the statutory but independent Climate Change Committee headed by eco-zealot Chris Stark. The same Chris Stark I mentioned in a video a while back, who lives in a flat in Glasgow and uses a gas boiler to heat his home. He says it's too difficult and expensive to change it to a heat pump. Anyway, according to the CCC's 6th Carbon Budget Report, people should preheat their home in the afternoon so that they use less electricity during the evening peak hours, with the argument that it will save the punter a few quid. Wonder how many people do heat their homes using electricity. But with all the windmills and solar power coming online, why won't there be an abundance of really cheap electricity available to all at the flick of a switch? Isn't that the aim of all of this? Or does the CCC know something we don't, i.e. that cheap, green electricity for all is a pipe dream, and in fact it will lead to restricted energy use forever? Especially when everyone starts using electricity-powered heat pumps. One thing that I don't understand, though, is most people switch off the electricity at work and then go home. So I do wonder how big that spike in demand is. But whatever size it is, it looks like renewables alone can't handle it. But that was not how this whole concept was sold to us. So we now have to time our electricity use to factor in a lack of availability, it seems. And this report came out in December 2020, so it's been known by the Eco Brigade for some time. And lack of availability always leads to demand outstripping supply. And that inevitably leads to higher prices. So much for plentiful, cheap green energy.